Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second artist conversation in the Building Intersectional Communities Through Art and Conversation series. Tonight, we will have two amazing artists who will showcase their masterpiece and talk about the intersections of disability, race, gender, and LGBT plus identities through their work. And I would also like to say, for those who are listening live or for the recording, happy Pride Month. Before I go further into explaining the purpose behind the series and the agenda for tonight, I would like to spend a few moments talking about the two featured artists. Jade T. Perry, Master of Education, is a Black queer disabled film practicing con- contemplative and spiritual activism. As a co-founder and board chair of the Mystic Soul Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, she works to center people of color in healing, mysticism, and activism.
Can you hand me a paper towel, please?
She began organizational training, workshops, and consulting in the spaces of higher education and social justice education. After 7+ years, she expanded this work, incorporating her experiences with spiritual activism, intuitive wellness coaching, and creative healing practice. She works across disciplines to provide training, workshops, curricula, and educational experiences. Jade has partnered with colleges and universities, youth organizing coalitions, nonprofit organizations, intentional living communities, and interfaith spaces. And then for our next feature artist, Barak, excuse me, excuse me. Barak, excuse me. My apologies, you all. I'm getting a little tongue tied right now. My apologies for my technical difficulties. Barak Ade Soleil is an award-winning artist who has been working within the contemporary art scene since 1991. Barak's creative practice speaks to the expanse of performativity and labor of the Black body, utilizing techniques drawn from the African diaspora, queerness, disability culture, and postmodernism. Barak is the founder of The Underbelly, D as in the letter D, by the way, and interdisciplinary network of artists of color, a recipient of the prestigious Catherine Dunham Choreography Award given by New York's AUDELCO for excellence in Black theater. Again, everyone, I apologize for the mishaps. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize in advance. So now I'll bring up the purpose behind this series. The Building Intersectional Disability Communities Through Art and Conversation series is a 3 week long, it's 3 weeks long, and we will cover 3 topics that are tied to disability, race, and intersectionality. This week's topic is about exploring intersections of disability, race, gender, and LGBT plus identities. Each week, people will have the opportunity to listen to disabled artists talk about their work and their thoughts on the topic of the week. There is also an opportunity each Saturday during those 3 weeks where you can create art or participate in workshops based on the week's topic. This series is made possible by the Healing Illinois Grant, which supports works by community organizations who are creating spaces for people in communities to engage in racial healing in the aftermath of national racial tensions that took place in 2020 and continuing to this day. In tonight's event, we will split into 2 parts. The first portion will consist of 2 artists presenting their work, each up to 10 minutes. Afterwards, we will open it up for a discussion between the moderator, Jade and the artist. Jade will ask a few questions to the artist, but this will be the time where you can ask them questions also. Community agreements for the discussion portion are as follows. When the artists are presenting or when the discussion is taking place, please remember to mute your mics out of respect for the artists who are featured tonight. Feel free to type in your questions or comments in the chat. Jen, Rhonda, or myself will field questions from the chat box. You may also use the raise hand feature in the participant section to ask to speak if you'd like to comment verbally. We may not get to everyone's questions due to time. However, we will do our best to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak up and speak out. Before I start before I give the artist the floor, I'll also like to note that we will have a 3 to 5 minute break between the presentations and the panel discussion and the conversations. Everyone, we are now at the point where our featured artists will give their presentation on their works. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentations and discussions. And now I hand it over to the artist, our featured artist, rather.
Jade, would you like to go first, please?
I sure can. Hello, everyone. It is such an honor to be here with you, to experience this moment with you, and to talk about art, which I can always do. When we're talking about access needs, I grew up in Southwest Philadelphia on the Northeast coast. So sometimes I talk a little bit fast. So please let me know if there's any adjustments that need to be made or if I need to repeat something. I'm always so happy to do that. Typically, when I lead an art activation, I'm leading it as though we're all going through this together. So it will be a little difficult to understand the art if I don't tell you a little bit of the theory behind the art. So, my name is Jade T. Perry, as was mentioned before, and I am a writer, a speaker, a performance artist. So I was trained originally in integrative arts, and I also was trained in the spiritual arts or the sacred arts. An Africana or a Black diasporic understanding of art is that it can be both functional and gorgeous, is that it can be a sacred right to be an artist. And so, because I am a spiritual artist, a lot of the spiritual arts is transferred through orature, that is, storytelling, poems, songs. It's also communicated through um, multisensory experiences, things that rely on a variety of senses to be experienced. The host told everyone in the bio that I am a Black queer disabled femme. And something that you will often hear me say is make the magic easy. Number one is the art is the magic. And number two is make the magic easy. And so I believe that art has a functional aspect. So for this moment that we are in, I would love to offer just some sight, some sound, and some thoughts, and some visuals for you to look at, because I believe in making the magic easy. Everyone's always like, what's your artist statement for your work? And, all of this. My statement is Black, queer, disabled, femme living is the art. Black, queer, disabled, femme living is the art. Okay, because we know that in the Black diaspora, art can be functional, art can be living, art can be alive, and art can also function for a purpose. I have been offering digital artistic activations since about 2016. IRL versions in real life. I don't really love that terminology, but IRL in real life. Years and years and years before that, and I moved into a digital platform because I wanted to see what Black and Indigenous spiritual arts were looking like in this present moment, in this digital age. And so, along with co-founding the Mystic Soul Project with my colleague, Teresa Mateus, I started doing some of my own work, art, writing, performance, teaching, all around centering Black and Indigenous spiritual arts, knowing that these spiritual arts are functional and happen in the everyday. So with the brief time that I have left, I want to share myself, my living as art, and talk about something that's been going on the digital landscape recently. Recently, I would say about 2-ish weeks or so back, there was a thread that went viral. I believe it was on Twitter, but don't quote me. And it was about Black women and femme spectrum folks and wearing bonnets, as in on a bonnet on your head to go outside. And there were so many engagements with this that it was unprofessional, that it was unsavory, that you could not be productive, if you had on a bonnet. If you've never seen a bonnet, it's literally just a little piece of satin that goes over your head. And so the first thing that I wanted to present with this artist statement of that Black, queer, disabled, femme living is the art, is that you'll notice I have on a head covering. Now, this is not a bonnet. This is Ankara fabric, which is a fabric that is used in so much Black diasporic art. And I like to wear head coverings to protect my ori. The ori, O-R-I, is a spiritual concept of the Yoruba of Nigeria. And that is the spiritual essence that is around your head, your crowning glory, that which that soul self, that head self that helps you to make the decisions and things, that spiritual self that helps you to make the decisions and things that you have to make during the day. And so, a part of the reason why I cover my head for going out, particularly being perceived and living as a Black, queer, disabled femme who uses mobility aid devices and things of that nature, is to cover my ori, that coolness of myself, so that I can navigate the misogynoir, that is gendered racism, the sexism, and the ableism. Going back to this digital thread about Black women and feminine spectrum folks wearing bonnets, again, there were thousands and thousands of comments, weeks and weeks of material on how it was quote unquote unprofessional for Black women and femmes to be perceived or seen with bonnets on. Through this lens, we can see in the digital medium that folks do not see the bonnet as a functional piece of art that is important to Black, queer, disabled, urban femmes within this context. There is a definition of ableism that I'd like to present as a sight sound collage for what I'm talking about. As I read it, I'm going to untie my Ankara fabric and I am going to show you what lies underneath. A working definition by Talila T.L. Lewis, Esquire. I can also put it in the chat as a link for those who might like to read along. This is attributed to lawyer and artist Talila A. Lewis. Ableism, a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normality, intelligence, excellence, desirability, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, religion, and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. In all of the different conversations about this digital phenomena, I heard a lot about misogynoir and gendered racism. I heard a lot about the struggles of Black women and femmes to make as much money as their artistic or corporate counterparts. I heard a lot of analysis about sexism as well, reading onto the bodies of women and femmes, a certain box, over narrative, the dominating colonial narrative of a way to reproduce, to behave, to excel. But one thing that I did not hear within the conversation was ableism and the anti-Blackness of ableism. For the women, the bodies of women, Black women, femmes, and feminine spectrum folks were not through colonialism ever seen as the standard of excellence, of worthiness, of value. Yes, this is racism. Yes, this is sexism, but it is also ableism. I think about my own life. When do I need the protection of my Ori to navigate a world that is ableist, to navigate a world that is misogynoiristic? I think about the protection of the bonnet in a Black urban context. I live with fibromyalgia, I live with chronic fatigue syndrome, and I live with a degenerative disc disease. I'm getting emotional. And many times, the bonnet is the way that I can navigate both socially and spiritually through a society that already deems my body as less professional, less worthy, and less valuable. But I think that not only is this a problem with ableism, it's a problem with how we see art. This bonnet was created by two Black women artists. It is both functional and it keeps my head covered. It is meant to show beauty, to show texture, to even help you look and be interested in the different waves of it. And so I think about art in general. What is it about the living, the Black, queer, disabled femme living that is not art, that is not magic, that is not sacred? I'm going to pause here. I'm going to invite us to take in 3 breaths together. And then, because I know I can get to talking and talking and talking, there's so much more to unpack with this. But after our breaths, I'd like to pass it over to our next featured artist so that we can make sure we have time for questions and for the fullness of the program. Thank you so much for hearing from me. If you'd like to keep in touch, you can keep in touch with me at jadetperry.com. You will see some of my written work there. Patreon.com/jadetperry hosts my written work, my visual work, as well as some spiritual activations and sacred art divination that I provide within community. And so I invite you to think about, what about your life is the art? Especially if you're here as a Black, queer, disabled femme. Hey. If not, that's okay. You can still participate. But especially if you're here as a Black, queer, disabled femme, what about your living is the art? Let's contemplate this question while moving through 3 deep and intentional breaths. Starting now. Breathing in through the nose, pausing at the peak of the breath, exhaling. Noticing that aliveness as art. Breathing in, filling the body, the lungs with air. Breathing out, allowing yourself to settle more deeply into yourself. Breathing in, knowing that the sacred and kinetic arts are interconnected, interrelated, and reside inside of you. Breathing out, making a commitment to see these intersections between art, life, and Black, queer, femme disability. Ashe, so be it. Thank you all so much.
Jade, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll transition to Barak, please.
Hello, I'm Barak Soleil. For audio description purposes, I am a brown skinned black person. I'm wearing a brown shirt, a blue sweater, and I'm in a white space that has windows and a couple of plants. I'm wearing glasses and I have a gray beard and a shaved head. This is my sign name, which refers to brown, bearded, as I'm told by the individual who gave me the sign name, Black Beauty. I was actually unaware that we were recording today, so I do not have the consent to share the videos that I was planning to share. I'm going to share an excerpt of a work called Objects Are Objects. It is a duet with another Black queer artist. So you will see this work. We are in a theater. It is pretty much a black space, as in lighting wise, the dark space with a white rectangle. There are two of us. We are wearing black. We are going to do floor work. The music is intentionally subtle, but it is present. It is the work of Alice Coltrane. And I've put into the chat the title of the piece, Objects Are Objects, the name of the other person, Drew Coleman, and the title of Alice Coltrane's work that you will be listening to as you witness the movement. It is called Galaxy in Turia. And I've just shared that in the chat. So we're going to take a moment to witness this. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to move through the piece, which is technically about 12 minutes. I'm going to cue it through some pieces. And that is what I'll be sharing, and we'll talk more about that.
Thank you for that. That's Barak, that was some very, for me, I will just say, for me, it was something that was unique. And for me, someone who hasn't had much experience with movement or experiencing the art, performance and art through movement, this was something very unique and very interesting for me. I appreciate viewing that and that combination. So, hey everybody, this is Pigeon again, and I think at this time, it might be good, it's a good time for us to take our 3-minute break. So according to my clock, it is 6:42. So we can take a short 3-minute break for us to stretch, take a breath, and come back at 6:45, where we will spend some time. I will have the great honor and privilege of doing a short interview and just a short dialogue with our two fantastic artists. And after that, we'll open it up to your questions and comments. So come back in 3 minutes. Hi, everybody. So it's me, JJ, and again, it is just after 6:45, just after about 6:46. Start back into our program. As I said, our next segment is I have the great pleasure and privilege of asking our two wonderful artists a couple of questions, a chance for us to get to know Jade and Barak a little bit better. And apologize if I mispronounce your names, my apologize. I will endeavor to do better. And it is my issue, and please, I ask for patience, and as I learn, and as my mouth gets to learn. So again, thank you both for sharing your wonderful art with us today. And again, this is just a little chance for us to get to know each of you a little bit better. The first question is for us to just ask, can you talk a little bit about yourself and share your journey and process and how you came to pick your mediums and as the way that you express your creativity. And if I may, I'm going to ask if Jade, if you can go for it.
Sure. My training in the creative and performing arts has been as long as I can remember, both informal and formal. It's important to mention that in the digital streets, in the social media streets, I'm known as the churchy mystic. And so it's important to share that, because a lot of the art that I engage or write about, and a lot of the spiritual arts that I do come from a Black folk religious space, not speaking about Christian as in capital C, but as in the Black folk religious complex, which inherently involves art. The art is the magic, and so we make the magic easy. And so I was, trained in ballet and African dance and this and that and theater and all all the programs I need, all the programs. And then when I was in my teenage years, my struggles with fibromyalgia began. And I had to learn how to become an artist in this new embodiment, in this ever-changing embodiment. And as someone who has multiple chronic illnesses, multiple disabilities, the landscape of my body has always been changing, and so the landscape of my art also has been changing, because for Black, queer, disabled femme, my argument is that our living is our art, and that is inherently spiritual. I am always inspired by I like to talk about my constellation, who's in my constellation. The works of Gloria Anzaldúa, Chicana, lesbian, writer, academic, is in my constellation around this idea of the Nepantlera, as the artist as the Nepantlera, that person that goes between those spaces of social justice and spirituality, right? And helps people to know that there is a bridge way, there is a meeting point where the nexus of these things happen. So the Nepantlera, or the griot, have been some things that are in my constellation. The work of Toni Cade Bambara, a Black feminist organizer, writer, novelist, filmmaker, is also within my constellation. And a lot of their work talked about spiritual activism, that is, understanding that social justice and spiritual activism are one and the same. There's no chasm between, right, those groups. And where there is a chasm, it's only by virtue of Western colonial thought. And so one of the things that I appreciated about this, particularly, and I ended up grabbing the text, literally on the first page, they talk about this of the salt eaters. They talk about this healer in the district, and the healer of the district has on this bright red flouncy dress, kente cloth, gold, brass, silver bangles. Her head is wrapped, right? All of these different things that seem to be just aesthetic, but they're using this in their spiritual art to channel, right, this divine message. And so I come from this tradition of folks who are borrowing across cosmologies, borrowing across disciplines, really to make this, I don't want to say argument because it's not an argument, to highlight this reality that Black, queer, disabled femme living is the art, is the magic, it is the spirituality. And so I think that's what I'll share about myself today. That's what I think is important for you to know about me today.
Well, thank you so much. And there is so much there, and just for a lot to take in, and the amount of influences that shape and just a little bit of what you've shared today about how it influences your art and shapes your process. So thank you for that. And I know there's a good chance I'm going to mispronounce it, and I apologize in advance. So, Barak, please share a little bit about your process and journey of your creative expression of using movement in your different mediums that you use.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Jade. I want to acknowledge that it is not too much. What you offer is exactly what's needed. And I also offer that as we have had a president that has a similar name, that folks have gotten used to saying it in a particular way. And so while I recognize and acknowledge the apologies, we need to understand, and this is connected to who I am, there are names and how we name ourselves, whether chosen or born with, are our names that identify how we want to move through the space. And as such, we are seeking, desiring, not to be called out of our name, but to understand the complexities and essence of it. Barak is connected to blessings, it's connected to lightning. It is different from Barak. And that is why I know I'm coming into my own name. I share this because the embodiment of that is that what I desire and intend. And I am on a journey to continue to embrace, exist, and move from Barak. And that is my journey, moving through all the complexities of my body. As Jade said, the landscape of the body, to be true to the landscape and the evolution of the body is what I intend to do, not to uphold what others perceive, project, juxtapose, impose, oppress. The sensation or the perception of my Black, disabled, queer, crip, hard, soft, femme, non-binary, male, masculine, fat, luscious, voluptuous body. And that is what I desire to articulate and express. I'm no longer interested or invested in the ways in which our bodies are told that they are not valued, that they are too dark, that they are too fat, that they are not thin enough, that my flat feet are not right. And so whatever journeys I've done, honestly, to reach this point through the myriad of techniques of which Jade has also expressed, I am here now, I'm in this body, and I'm really committed to what this body and how it unfolds in its aging, in its disabling, in its softness, in its merging. That is what I'm intending to do. I'm intending to attend to this as my practice.
Thank you so much. And Barak, I thank you for your patience, and I think it is important to acknowledge all our names are important because they are how we identify to ourselves, and our names are what we use to help identify, in some ways, connect with our communities. And so I thank you for your patience, and I and I do honor your name, and I will endeavor to do it correctly. Jade as well with your name as well. And I think and again, just thank you so much for sharing your journey and getting to know you a little bit better. As a follow-up, as TJ mentioned, as part of our process in our Healing Illinois series, we're looking at the intersectionality of race, disability. And for tonight, looking at the intersection of race, disability, and the community. And my follow-up question is, as you were planning, preparing for this evening's presentations, can you share a little bit about your process in choosing the pieces and the material that you share, and why you felt that, like why you framed it the way you did, or your process in I guess your process in picking your piece and sharing it with us tonight.
Yes. As I shared, I was not aware that this was going to be recorded, and I had not consented, so I actually did not share the pieces that I thought I was going to share, because I was interested in the framing of healing. And so the works that I chosen were works I felt reflected what it means to be a Black queer, also as male identified, also as non-binary, what it meant to deal with the reflections and perceptions of my body. And ultimately, I chose this work, and I hope and give respect to Drew Coleman, as I did not get Drew's permission to share this in a public space. I hope that they will forgive me. But in recognizing that work, objects are objects. It's framed as the Black body has consistently been an object. And in some ways, currently, as will always be framed. So objects are objects. And it is flow work. It is not flow work because that is just a compositional choice. It is a flow work because I am a disabled individual who primarily is grounded in being in the floor. For me to always be an upright, to be on 2 feet, is not in my body does not want to be there. I have been in a journey where my body is like the floor is the thing. And yet being on the floor and being a Black body, and being a Black body that is perceived as a male, to be on the floor and to be face down in this world is perceived as dead, is to be perceived as oppressed, and is the inundation of media's perpetual images of Black and brown and other bodies, but Black bodies on the floor. They are not alive. That is what we constantly see, or honestly, they are at the point where they're moving towards their death. And my notion in this composition is return to the life and the breath of a body moving on the floor, on the street. We are moving, we are still alive. And so there is that. To deal in the complexity of intersectionality as framed and affirmed and moving through Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw's notion through Black womanhood and its labor and the labor of Black women and those who live and exist in relationship to that. I acknowledge when I speak about intersectionality, I'm also bringing in disability and my understanding as a non-binary male individual. So I say that to say, it is also about that. And when we come together, when I and the other individual who is male perceived come together, that for me is as an act of queerness, an act of love, an act of bodies that have been thought of as objects coming together, an act of touch, an act that we can be touched, an act that we can be soft. And for me, that is the healing. Two Black bodies in this white space for so long, moving through the rigors, falling and colliding and coming up and falling and moving through, find each other, and that is the healing.
That is so beautiful. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. A little bit of behind the artistic choice for today has been a few things. So this conversation has been going on, like I said, about 2 weeks about this bonnet, and I remember because I really do live in crib time. I really do not live in like the normative, 9 to 5 moments, and so I remember waking up, whether it was day, night, I'm not sure. And everyone was talking about bonnets. and everyone was talking about bonnets and Black women, many of whom were not qualified to talk about bonnets or Black women or bonnets and Black women. But lots of understandings of, this being unprofessional or unvaluable way of presenting yourself. And I thought that's so interesting that we're so present to the racism of that. Even your people who have an analysis, we're so present to the racism of that. We might be present to the sexism of that, but we're not as present to the ableism of that. And it's important to know that ableism is inherently anti-Black. Inherently, these are not my words. These are Talila A. Lewis's words, that ableism is inherently anti-Black. So I wonder if we looked at it through the lens of ableism, how much quicker will we get to the anti-Blackness of thinking about the ways that Black women or femmes present themselves to the world? And if it doesn't fit the meta narrative, right, then we say that it's not professional. It's not worthy. It's not right. What it is just not the dominant narrative. What it is objects are objects to to link to some of these pieces. But I also have been thinking about the warrior. One of the things that is important to know in the Black folk religious complex. So this is talking about the Black folk religious complex as it exists across the diaspora. Divination is a really important part of the Black folk religious complex. Divination is only a scary word for folks because of Western Christian colonialism. So let me define what I mean by divination. It is using a natural element or a made element to get a message of clarity, of inspiration, which all of artists need, of clarity, of inspiration, and of purpose. Why have I chosen to walk this path? And so again, we're back to this Africana praxis that is theory and action of doing art, that the art is also a spiritual tool. This is a tarot card by Jesse Jumanji from the Afro Tarot. It's a beautiful art, but I use it all of the time for divination. This is from the Soleil Oracle deck. It's the same card, signification, but different artists. This is by Lolu ACG, I believe, from the Soleil Oracle deck. Now, as this 2-week conversation was going on, I continued to draw this card. Whenever I would go to my deck, I would get the 9 of Wands or the Igbo Ya, courage, 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 courage. So the Igbo Ya card or the 9 of Wands is the warrior. I began to think about what is the Black queer disabled femme armor that we equip ourselves to go out with into this ableist, misogynoir, gendered racist world, right? Heteropatriarchal world. What is the armor that we use to have that Igboya, that courage, right? And so, because both of these things were happening at the same time, I finally, the spirits always connect things faster than we do. I think I finally got it after 4 rounds of choosing this card, right? In the energy of preparing for this particular moment. So I knew that the performance art needed to call up this courage warrior, conjure this kind of feeling, and also talk about some of the art of living of Black queer disabled femmes and what's the armor that it takes, what equips us. I didn't even get into like nail culture. I didn't even get into hoop earrings. I didn't even get into all of that. Right now, today, we just said the people want to talk about bonnets. So we're at the bonnets today. But I think as we build our analysis of what ableism really is, we have some real, and we incorporate the spiritual as the artistic. I think we have some amazingly fun stuff that we can do to expand our view of reality just beyond the physical material sense. And we can do that with our art, and our art can do that within us.
Wow, that's you both shared so much and and depth and nuance to just take in and to think, and it's much more, it's a lot different than what I was anticipating for tonight, and I am so grateful for that. It has, I think, the ideas, the impressions, both of your energies and your journeys are so different. For me, from speaking just from my perspective, and my relationship with art and creativity, what you both shared and what I observed through your creative expressions was different. It pushed my understanding and helped me push and grow my appreciation to just the diversity of art expression and the way that it can interpret ideas and communicate ideas, and the connection to the community that I'm a proud member of, as well as, for me, the immigrant community and just the richness of all of that. So I would love to monopolize more of your time, but I am now going to open it up, and I'm sure that our wonderful attendees who have also just had the time to reflect and think about all the wonderful pieces shared have some ideas and questions. So please, I'm going to open it up. If you all have questions, comments for Jade or Barak, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to ask Rhonda and TJ, if you've noted comments or questions in the chat, to please open it up now.
Thank you, Jay. This is Rhonda. I also wanna encourage everybody, if they have any questions or comments, please feel free to either type them in the chat area or you can unmute yourself and ask in person. And I also want to thank both our guest speakers, the artists, you, and thank you so much for sharing your inputs and your insights. Yeah, I see a question here in the chat. Jade, and this is for Jade. Jade, how did you transform your amazing art into showcasing your talents?
Oh my goodness. How did I do that? How am I doing that? I don't know. One day at a time. Honestly, one of the things that I said was, as my body has changed, my art has had to change. The way that the vehicle, the medium that I use for art has had to change. I was trained in, forms like musical theater and very heavy, person to person dynamics. And just the path of my life was such that I needed some pretty intense care around 2016, but I didn't want that to mean that there was no art being created. And so I really had to live this, Black queer disabled femme living is the art. I had to figure out, like, what is the art of living that brings this perspective from this middle space, right? And what I have found is that it's such a Black form of art making, right? I think about folks like my grandmother, who just made sure there were just pretty things, gorgeous things around just to look at, because it was good for our soul to look at beautiful things, right? I know that Western European society would say that she's not an artist, but that would be inaccurate. And so for me, the transformations have really been the engine of the transformations have been my lived experience, right? I'm grateful for my training. I'm grateful to be trained as an interdisciplinary and integrative artist. But what I'm more grateful for is an Africana praxis that is theory and action of art, because many times Black art is being viewed through Eurocentric Western standards. And then sometimes as the artist, you can replicate that internally. All my art needs to be high art. What is even all my art needs to be like only able to look at, not be experienced. What is that? And so I really wanted to engage what are the ways that Black queer femme spectrum folks, I say, they have saved my life every day in every way. And so showcasing that art of living, so many of us with chronic illnesses and disabilities that we may not have even been diagnosed with because of the sociological realities of the barriers and obstacles to diagnosis. How are we still creating art? How are we still living? That's always my artist question is my living question. And so I think the transformations are necessitated by the lived experience. I hope that was in the realm of your question.
No, thank you. Again, it's very, there was a lot there to just for us to process and take in. And I think it's something that I think we've all come to appreciate, is the thoughtfulness of your experience and your process. And it is very thoughtful and very nuanced, and like the understanding of how someone who's creative, who is an artist, just the level of thinking and processing to create something that when shared with the community, that it says something. And to that end, a question that I wanted to follow up on is, in a lot of conversations around art, there are, people have asked artists, and you may very well have, I'm sure, have gotten this question, but we wanted to ask, as a artist who identifies as a being member of a person of color, of the disability community, who's connected with the LGBTQ community, and an artist, what do you feel is the role of art in connecting with issues or causes? Does it have to always have a message of trying to push a message or an idea or change thought, or can it be just for art's sake and kind of for fun, or some combination of the two? And what is your perspectives or experiences kind of navigating all of that? And hopefully that makes sense. So who'd like to take that question first?
I can share. I think that is, I'm toying with my hesitancy is I'm toying with the question itself. Are you okay? I'm toying with the question itself. What I'll say is, I think that art has many roles, but I don't think that we give enough respect to art as its own force, as its own energetic force, that exists, that is conjured, that is learned. So I think that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, in my worldview, the art that we create, at least my hope for the art that we create, particularly from what folks understand as quote unquote the margins, is to, for me, leave for other generations across the arc of time to understand a more truthful, soulful, and aligned meta-narrative. That Eurocentric art does not get to dominate the meta-narrative. Sometimes that might happen in fun. Every time I sit down to get my nails done, I am sitting down with an artist and I'm wearing art for 3 weeks, a month, all of these things, right? And we could go through, like, is it for fun or is it making a political statement? Yes. I think the nail art adds to a more true, a more soulful, a more aligned meta narrative of what art is and what art can be and who can create art, right? So the issue, I think, becomes when we get all of this extra material and we still are so committed to like Eurocentric ways of viewing art. Does it need to be either this or that? That question's rooted in Western binary thinking. So it's hard to answer a binary question with art forms that are not attached to binary. So my answer is all yes, everything, all of the above. And I'll continue toying with that question.
Thank you. Barak?
I mean, I think I'm very much in alignment with Jade. I think this question, and I'll be honest, I feel it's othered, it's othering. I think the framing of it is that white artists do not get asked this question. And I am concerned to be speaking about intersectionality and affirmation, because I build it from an affirmation. I build it from the truth of being. I build it from that that we are the thing, and I'm not interested or invested in the binary anymore. And I think this is a question that you're absolutely right, JJ. And we have been asked this question. We have. And for me, I would like to know what artists besides Black artists, because I don't identify necessarily anymore as a person of color, though I'm in consciousness of it. I think Blackness needs to be said and stated. I think disability needs to be said and stated. I think queerness needs to be said and stated. Not because I'm trying to add on, I'm just trying to exist in my complexities and my truth. And I share this with you because I think the question is similar to asking, well, which are you? We're all of that. And we are in a space by which Blackness is consistently asked to be parceled out, and parts of it in relationship to it. And I actually say, well, it's actually that. And it's not you, JJ, it is saying to those who exist in a space that yes, we can be all of that. But I'll be honest, I've never been an activist in the truth of what people talk about in terms of activism, because I believe in my cultural depth and being. And that cultural depth of being is I do what I need to do, and my folks do what they need to do. And they're true to themselves, and as they need to share themselves in certain ways, that's how they do it. So I say that to say is that for me, I'm not interested anymore in the conversation of art as political. Art is a way of being, and being in this moment right now calls for us to be in and of the world. And I do name that I'm a contemporary artist because I am intentionally being of the world and in relation to what's going on. So in this moment right now, to speak about my Blackness and to say perhaps it's politicized, it really is just saying this is my truth and this was happening. In the world, everyone else might be like, oh, Black, but really we're just in our truth. So I ask, that is, in many ways, that is my answer to the question, that it must be must be and is always all of those things. And when it is not, as Jade pointed out, when it is wrapped in Eurocentric notions, then it's asking for me to be something that I'm not, and assuming that because I am not like that, that I have to be something else. And I'm not something else. We are the thing. We are all of that. And I acknowledge, as Jade talking about, within Yoruba, within the diaspora, there is little conversation about the separation between art and living, because everyone is in the bantaba, in the dancing sacred space, moving. And everyone is creating, though there might be those who may carry a legacy of a particular craft or form, but everyone. In the Yoruba tradition, within the space, when people do egungun dances or when ceremonial dances or folks, they're moving through the streets for everyone. Everyone is contributing to that. So I share this to say that I think in this moment, I would like to not hear that question imposed on Black and brown and people of color anymore to other them to say they're not. I'd rather the question be for everyone, how are we living in our art and how are we being in our art?
Thank you for that. And I appreciate both of yours giving feedback on the question and pushing me and all of us to think about language, framing, messaging. And it is important. And honestly, there's a small part of me, and I think, and just out of the sense of convenience, it's like, oh, I don't want to, being that nuanced takes energy. But at the same token, those of us, all of us who are part of the disability community, who are intentionally looking to see and hear everybody and with everybody's unique identities and heritage and history and experiences, affecting all that. Your messages of questioning the question, of pushing to think about how we frame questions, and the idea of some questions, even how innocent they may sound as we craft them, are shaped from our societal ideas. And racism, ableism, sexism, and oppressive systems are a strong influence. So we have to acknowledge that influence and move, and through your words and your art and your pushing to keep us and have our minds open to be more intentional, be more open, and to accept, yes, it is work. Yes, it is work, but it is important work. And ultimately, it will make it can make our experiences richer because we are open to new ideas of art, of creativity. It's not so much, we're not so limited by the society or the culture that we have a great deal of our lives. And, yeah,
I
please.
think Jade talks about the meta narrative. So I want to be clear because you're absolutely right to be intentional. I want to remove the notion that it's about pushing, because I'm not pushing, I'm just naming.
Yes.
And I know that part of the meta narrative and the part of the way shaping the meta, and I'm not speaking for Jade, I'm speaking for myself, part of my understanding of the meta is to speak to how we are intentional at all the levels, how we are intentional to understand how we're moving through the world in relation to spirituality, in relation to being of the world, and in relation to other worlds are existing simultaneously. And part of this is like, I want to refrain from using the word push. I'm just embracing my truth. And if others are in a place where they feel pushed or not held, that's not for me to articulate. Similarly, I want to say that again, there's a sense of the othering, and that it is about that it's not about that this is a question that is simple, because this question is not simple. See what's unfolded. It is quite complex. And the notion of when I say other, the notion of the upheld body, and part of the objects is connected to a piece called the quote unquote good body. The upheld body is always what we reference to. So anything else is not that. And I'm not interested in that. And I want to respond in relationship to TJ's question around, well, how do we do this? And I would love, Jane, if you can actually repeat the question that's in the chat, because I think I want to make sure I'm attending to it.
I'm going to actually ask Rhonda, can you read that? Because
sure.
Please.
So TJ is asking as a follow-up question, how can we be of the world as artists while battling the notion of being spiritual? In Eurocentric standards, we usually are challenged to avoid being worldly or in tone with the earth based on Western thoughts.
And I as much as I would hate to rush things, I just checked the time and we are right at about when our program was supposed to end. So I'm going to ask if you can share your thoughts in a concise way with respect. Because that is an important question.
Oh, is it being handed to me? Okay. Okay, succinctly. One thing that is true, that I have found as true, little t true in my work, is that there has not been a colonization or an oppression of the body without there being a colonization or oppression of the spirit. That is, right, when Black folks, when Africans came to these shores, what was taken away, not just the dignity, not just the freedom, but the art, and which was the spirituality. Here I'm thinking of the talking drum, art, spiritual praxis, and a mode and means of divination, right? Just like we talked about, that was taken away. Obia, a system of conjure. There were laws that were written writing these things out, right? No art that's associated with these art forms. What is very real is that in Black religious complexity, and in Black religious art form, especially if you think of dance, social dance, a lot of it is already oriented downward towards the earth, right? The ancestors, some of the Black theo mysticism behind that is the ancestors are buried underneath the earth, so the power comes from the earth upward. To think that, oh, the power comes from beyond us down, that is what Sylvia Winters calls a Greco-Roman ethnoastronomy, a Greco-Roman ethnoastronomy. Europeans took hold of that ethnoastronomy, and astronomy that is indigenous to a certain space, right? So Europeans took this during the time of the Enlightenment, made it this binary between Christian, sacred, or secular, laity or secular, right? And then put that ethnoastronomy on through the nations, right? That's what we call spiritual colonialization. So when we challenge either ourselves, actually, I'm not even gonna say challenge, I'm gonna say invite. When we invite ourselves to be in a different orientation towards our art as praxis in the world around us, we're actually undoing years and years of spiritual colonialization. We're saying, you know what? Greco-Roman ethnoastronomy, astronomy, excuse me, was great for the Greco-Roman people. But within my diaspora, there's a way of looking at art. There's a way of looking at life. There's a way of looking at cosmology, right? That is not the, again, meta-narrative. And so I don't know if it helps us to say, I need to battle these notions of being spiritual or an artist. I really think it's, can I invite myself back to myself? Can I invite myself into an ethnoastronomy that makes sense for my folks, my lived experience? So I don't think it's a challenge or a battle. It's an invitation. And for that invitation, we're back to the 9 of Wands. We have to have courage, right? We're back to this notion of the warrior, that the warrior is not the warrior because they're fighting all the time. They know when there's an invitation that there's something worth fighting for. And so this question is a lifelong journey question. I know that wasn't succinct, but that's my answer.
Thank you, Jade. Barak?
So I just think that this notion of, again, being in relationship to Eurocentric notions is a thing. And I invite, as Jade said, invite us to go into the healing of being ourselves. And that is the journey. So we are always simultaneously being in a place of joy and grief. And for Black folk, particularly in this moment, we are always in this consistent space of simultaneously being revered and upheld, at the same time appropriated and defeated and killed. And I recognize this moment of the spiritual as being the truth by which I need to move through the world in order to move to some sort of healing in this moment, because I do not take for granted that I am here as a Black person of this world. I may not be here because of what's going on. So I think I don't have a choice but to embrace the spiritual and live in the space. And while others may reference it as worldly or they're trying to battle with me around it, I'm just in my truth. they're going to battle with us regardless. Objects are objects. Objects are objects. They're going to do it no matter what. But in this moment, I can only invest in my folk and my spirit and my practice and my living.
Thank you both so much for just an incredible conversation and really just thoughtful conversation and discussion, just giving us a lot to think about and reflect on. It was a wonderful evening with you both. Just to conclude out, as we round out our evening, just wanted to share a couple of things. Again, thank you to Barak and Jade for just your creativity and sharing your art with us this evening. I also want to acknowledge and thank all our partners for this evening. UIC's Institute on Disability and Human Development, the Chicagoland Disabled People of Color Coalition, the School of the Art Institute at Chicago, the Disability Culture Activism Lab at SAIC, Access Living, Chicago Community Trust, and Healing Illinois for their support. I also want to give special thanks to Dr. Sandy Yee at the Art Institute and her team, her DECAL team, for all their hard work in coordinating with all our artists and helping to, again, have a very successful series, as well as Timotheus Gordon and Dr. Kelly Shea and Rhonda, who's been very, on our UIC team, who have been really key in coordinating these conversations. Last couple of things is, as PJ mentioned, as we shared, this is a series. So in addition to these Tuesday evening conversations, we are also having art workshops facilitated by the Disability Activism Lab team. And the second workshop that is also under the theme of intersectionality of race, disability, and LGBT+, will happen this Saturday, June 12th, from 1:30 to 3 p.m. It is a small group, so it is limited to just a small group of 10 attendees. You can register at the link of bit.ly/0612 workshop. And the featured artist for this Saturday is Lily Diego Johnson. And lastly is our third conversation in the conversation series will take place next Tuesday, the 15th. Theme of freedom and celebration of intersectional identities. So we'll spend time just reflecting on the richness, the beauty, and the wonder of intersectionality of all our identities entail. And again, that'll be next Tuesday, the 15th at 6 to 7:30 p.m. And you can register at tinyurl.com/Healing Illinois Convo 03. And our featured artist next week will be Wasaka Torres. And again, I'm probably mispronouncing a lovely name, and Kathy Saunders. So please, if you're able, we invite you to come back next Tuesday. Also, if you're interested, participate in this Saturday. And with that, thank you all so much, and with much gratitude for joining us this evening, and special gratitude and thanks to Jade and Barak.